Hi, I am Dr. Derick Lindquist. I am Dean of the Jindal School of Psychology and Counseling. And today I want to talk to you about a really important but still rather mysterious topic: consciousness. Right? I think everyone probably has a basic understanding of this term, but I want to look at it from a few different perspectives. I'm not going to offer a lot of answers today, but I do hope to get you thinking. So first, whenever we experience the world, right, we have 5 senses everyone is familiar with. That information flows in through your sense organs, your eyes, your ears, etc., and it is converted into what we call a perception. Now, one of the interesting things about perception is some things exist independent of the observer in the world, right? This table, these chairs are solid. They have a certain size, a certain height, a certain width. Other things are highly contingent upon the observer. So for instance, color. When you look at this woman with red hair, or the yellow car, or the blue ocean, right? Your experience may be dramatically different from my experience in terms of how we perceive it. We may both look at the woman with red hair, but we may see it slightly differently. Now, if this seems counterintuitive, think of a person with color blindness, typically a male, but they may be able to look at this woman and say, yes, she has red hair, but they may not perceive that color in the same way that we do. We call these secondary sensory properties because, again, the perception can be unique to each individual. Now, there's another issue with consciousness. Right now, you can hear me, you can see me. We experience the world with this immediacy, this unification. It's an immediate, unified, conscious experience. But the fact is, as that sensory information comes into your brain, it's processed in different brain regions, and it takes different amounts of time for that sensory information to be processed. That is, to be broken down and built back up again. But there is no single area in the brain where all of that sensory information comes together. So how is it that we have this unified conscious experience of reality, of our environment? It's a great mystery, one that we're still struggling to understand. How is sensory information bound together into this unitary, immediate experience? So when we think about consciousness, there's lots of ideas that have been put forth. One of the older ones is from Freud. I'm sure everyone has heard of Sigmund Freud. So he argued there's 3 different levels. You have the conscious mind. This is anything that's present in your mind right now, right? Maybe you're thinking about dinner, or maybe you're thirsty, or whatever the case may be, whatever's occupying the content of your conscious mind. The preconscious mind is information in your mind or your brain that can be accessed, but it's not currently present. So think of all those long-term memories in your head, right? You can access and bring them forward, and you can think about your high school graduation or your 12th birthday party at any point you want. The other is the unconscious mind. This is information below our level of awareness. And according to Freud, and there's good evidence to support this, much of what goes on in your head, in your mind, does occur at an unconscious level. It's only when it percolates upward do we become conscious of it. That's why an iceberg works so well, right? Consciousness is what's above the water. That's a small part of what's going on in your mind. Most of it is in the preconscious or the unconscious. Now, there's another way we can think about this. This is based on some of the ideas of a guy named Antonio Damasio. He said, look, we have degrees of consciousness, including proto-consciousness. This is the simplest. If you're alive, if you're able to respond to your world, bring in food, excrete waste, very, very simple level of consciousness. Moving up, we have what's called core consciousness. And this is probably most of the animals that are alive today. So whether it's a dog or a turtle or a peacock or a shark, core consciousness refers to these organisms that are able to not only respond to the world, but they can learn, they can adapt, right? They engage in social behavior. They show emotions. Further, at the top, we have what we call extended consciousness. Now, we're building one upon the other here. So we still have all those components of core consciousness, but with extended consciousness, we now have self-awareness. Awareness of your own mind and how your mind relates to the world around you, as well as other people. So as humans, of course, we are at the top. We have extended consciousness, but it's probably not limited to us. Other higher level organisms probably also have extended consciousness to a degree. So think of chimpanzees or dolphins or whales. All right? So again, this is another way in which we can conceptualize this idea of consciousness. Furthermore, I want to give you a thought experiment. So, this is Mary. Mary is entirely colorblind. She cannot experience anything in the world except for black and white. But she is a brilliant scientist. She knows everything there is to know about color vision in humans. Everything, down to the smallest protein and gene. She can explain it all. So here's the question. Mary can explain color vision, but Mary cannot experience color vision, right? Most people think there's something missing from the mere description. That is, there's something inherent in the experience itself, the conscious experience that we need to understand. And this is an idea that was first put forth by a guy named Thomas Nagel. Right? What is it like to be a bat? Bat echolocate, right? They send out these little brief sounds, they bounce off objects, and they perceive the world that way. We can describe it, but as humans, we don't know what the subjective experience of echolocation is. So this is the idea, this experience. Sometimes we call this phenomenology or qualia. This is often referred to as the hard problem of consciousness. Because we know that there is something, again, that seems to be sort of inherent, implicit in the experience itself. What we say is there's something it is like to see a sunset, or to go to the Louvre and see the Mona Lisa, or even simply eating an apple, right? So this is the subjective qualitative properties of any experience. Now, why I'm raising this is because as a behavioral neuroscientist, as a psychologist, right, we are a science. We use the scientific methodology, and we base our results on empirical evidence, which means it's based on observation and measurement. We need to write it down, right? We write it down and then we publish it. But here's the conundrum. How do you write down? How do you explain from a third-person perspective a subjective experience? How do you write down and explain what a qualia is? Right? Now, we are making progress on this. This is a field where we look at what's called the neural correlates of consciousness. All right? But again, it's still correlation. We're trying to understand which brain areas are active and give rise to consciousness. But there is this question. We will get better at this as we move forward, right? We will better able to explain how consciousness emerges out of neural function, out of the firing of those 100 billion neurons in your head. But some people question, and I have to say I agree with this, can we ever fully explain or capture the experience, that qualia, that phenomenological aspect of seeing a sunset? Right? We can describe all of the brain activity, but ultimately, how do we account for that first-person subjective experience?